Well, this is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket, and the roosters keep up a racket all night long. And this is a common lawyer comments concerning our common law, our law of the land, as it is compared and contrasted with its ever-present antagonist on every continent and in every age, the law of the city. The law of the land versus the law of the city spells the history of all mankind from the settling of the city of Babylon 4,200 years ago approximately to the present. So I'm going to go through, I hope I can finish it. There are 333 questions here. I won't finish it today. But I'd like to go through a few questions first, each day we get together. And this is called the Elementary Catechism on the Constitution of the United States. This is a worthwhile publication. Published in the year 1828. 1828 by Arthur J. Stansbury. And it's for use in the schools of America. Now, I wasn't allowed, when I graduated from high school, I wasn't allowed to graduate unless I passed the test on the provisions of the Constitution of the United States. Not only that, I spent the last year, I was in high school, my senior year, with the rest of my seniors. Wasn't very many of us, but enough to make up a class, I reckon. And we prepared ourselves for that examination. That was required by law. Our Constitution of the United States is a brief of common law government. So what I'd like to do, there are 330 questions in the Catechism. Now, what's a catechism? That's a Greek word. It's in the New Testament. And it means to be catechized. What does it mean to be catechized? It means to have learned the answers to questions that are put forth to the student, and the student learns the questions and learns the answers. Now, Christianity is big on catechisms. If you were raised in a parochial school or as a Romanist, you were likely catechized. If you were raised as a Bible-believing Presbyterian, you were catechized through the Westminster Catechism. If you were raised in a Dutch Reformed or a German Reformed community, you were probably catechized with the Heidelberg Confession, the Heidelberg Catechism. If you were raised a Lutheran, any sort of a Bible-believing Lutheran, you were catechized with what's called Luther's Catechism. If you were raised a Reformed Baptist, you're probably catechized with the London Confession of whatever that year was. It was put in place. It was very much like the Westminster Confession, the Baptist Reformed Confession. And all of these confessions are connected with what we call catechisms, answers to questions so you can learn the subject. The word appears in the Older Testament of the Bible, a Hebrew word that means catechism, when Abraham gathers up 318 of his men to go rescue his nephew Lot, who was taken as a POW, a prisoner of war. He was taken along with his family and his holdings. He was taken as a prisoner, booty, and Abraham gathered up 318 of the servants, not his family, but the servants in his household that were catechized, it says. The King James says trained. Were they trained? Yes. Does the word mean to be trained? Yes. But it means more than that. It's more precise than that. He gathered up 318 men that had been catechized. He divided them against the enemy, attacked them, and took back all of the belongings they took. Very effective, small force of men. but they were catechized, and the Bible makes special point of that. Catechism is the way to learn, according to the Bible. That's my conclusion. I want to start in on this. Let me read what it says here in the preface. This is Stansbury writing. That a people living under a free government, which they have themselves originated, should be well acquainted with the instrument which contains it. And that needs not be proved, he said. We need to be well acquainted with it. Were the system indeed very cumbrous and extensive, run into minute detail, and hard to be retained in the memory, even this would be no good reason why pains should not be taken to understand and to imprint it upon the mind. But when its principles are simple, its features plain and obvious, and its brevity surpassing all example, that's our Constitution of the United States, a brief of common law government, it is certainly most reprehensible negligence to remain in ignorance of it. Reprehensible negligence. Has anybody taken time to teach you about the Constitution of the United States, clause by clause, blow by blow, detail by detail? I dare say most of you listening haven't had anybody in your life that's taken time to do that. And you wonder, we all want, why is our country falling apart? Why is there no respect for fathers and mothers? Why do people look like aborigines with piercings and tattoos all over their hide? What has changed? Why is it that young people are communist and will tell you so? Why is it that we allow those that are in power? Why did we allow them in power? Why do we pay any attention to them? I'll tell you why. Because we don't know our law. And if you don't know your law, you don't know nothing. If you don't know the fundamental duties of government, and that's what the Constitution of the United States is, it's the fundamental limits and duties and limits, the limited duties of the government of the United States, the general government in Washington, D.C. Yet how small a portion of the citizens. Now, he says of this republic, I maintain strongly this is not a republic in the face of all the things that are said about it in the patriot community. A republic is no different than a democracy, never has been. A republic is the majority principle. This is not fundamentally a republic. I differ with Stansbury. I differ with Ben Franklin said, a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. I differ with him. That's just blatantly false. The Soviet socialists had a republic, the communist nation. The French reign of terror was a republic. Communist China is the Republic of China. North Korea, a communist nation, hardcore Republic of North Korea. Is it a republic? You bet it is. It operates on a majority, and that's what a republic does, and that's what a democracy does, and there is no difference. And the folks that made those two things popular, namely the Greeks, they didn't distinguish between the two, and I don't see any distinction either. It operates on the majority principle. The majority principle is useful, and we use it. A majority of votes in Congress can get a bill sent over to the Senate. But that's not final. And in a republic and in a democracy, majority vote someplace is final. Whether indirectly by representation, we call that a republic, or directly by popular vote. Well, I make a big deal about that because we're not a republic. We are a common law government. That makes us different than almost every other nation in the world. Do we have a Republican element in our government, a republic element? Yes. We have a Republican government clause in our Constitution? Yes. That doesn't mean a republic. We'll talk about that, Lord willing, when we get to it. Yet how small a portion of the citizens of this, he says republic, I say common law government, have even a tolerable acquaintance with their own Constitution. Republicanism does not separate us from the rest of the world and all the evil empire. Common law does. It has appeared to the author of the following sheets that this culpable want of acquaintance with what is of such deep interest to us all is to be traced to the omission of an important part of what ought to be an American education, namely, the study of the institutions of our government. We prize them, it is true. Oh, we'll talk about the Constitution. We'll pound the Bible. Oh, yeah, pound the table. But do we really know what's in these documents? That's what he's saying. And it is quite enough in the habit of boasting about them. Would it not be well to teach their elements to those best inheritance they are? He says, it's good to boast about them. Okay, I believe in the Constitution. I believe more than that in the Bible. That's a good boast. But what are you boasting about? Do you really know what you're boasting about? The following work has been prepared with a view to such an experiment. It is written expressly for the use of students, and it has been the aim and effort of the writer to bring down the subject completely to a level with their capacity to understand it. Whether he has succeeded, the trial must show. He has purposely avoided all abstruse questions and has confined himself to a simple, common-sense explanation of each article. That's good. It is very possible some inaccuracies may be discovered. That's always true when a mere mortal writes something. I'm not going to hold that against him. I'm not even going to hold against him that he calls America a republic. It's such a popular point of view. It's hard to avoid it. It is very possible some inaccuracies may be discovered, and should this be the case, they shall be carefully corrected, should the work be so far approved as to reach another edition. In the meantime, he cannot indulge the hope that in laying this, cannot but indulge it. He's saying, I can't help myself, that in laying this little offering upon the altar of our country, he has rendered her an acceptable service. And maybe us, you and me together, going through this, we also will render an acceptable service to our country. So let's quit messing around and get right to it. 333 questions. This is question number 1. In what country do you live? In what country do you live? I dare say if I went to the street, went to the beaches, went to the cities of America and asked this question, I would get all sorts of answers. What country do you live in? The answer is the United States of America. And that's simple. Some of you would have said that, I know. But there's a lot of folk out there that would not have said that because they flat don't know. But what does that mean? Why is this country, question 2, why is this country called the United States? Because it is made up of a number of states which were once separate, but afterwards agreed to unite together. They were separate. As a matter of fact, the 13 original colonies, once they became states, were separate countries. They had their own defense force, their own government. They didn't answer to each other. They weren't drawn together in any real strong way. The Articles of Confederation were a start, and a good one. Number 3, what do you mean by a state? Answer, I mean any district of country whose people are all under one government. Well, that's important to think about. We talk about the states of the United States. We talk about the state of France. It is a state. What is a state? Any district of a country whose people are all under one government. Now, he defines a state as having a territory, land, a district, he calls it. That's true. Well, how does international law see a country? Oh, international law says a country's got to have 3 things. And all of international relations operate fundamentally on this idea. And I'm going to tell it to you here real quick. Number 1, if there's a country, there has to be a land, a bounded land that has boundaries. If it doesn't have boundaries, you don't have a country. That means boundaries that are defined. Listen, if I buy a piece of real estate or a piece of farmland, and I don't know where the boundaries are, do I really own anything? Well, maybe and maybe not. That is why it's so important that we define our boundaries and we know we've got a certain parcel of land. That's why DJ wants to build a very definite fence or a wall between the border of Mexico and the United States. Why? Well, as the old poem says, good fences make good neighbors. If you don't know where the boundary is, listen, the Garden of Eden was the first parcel of real estate that the allodial landlord bequeathed to the race of Adam. He bequeathed it to our grandma and grandpa, Adam and Eve. And the Hebrew word in the Old Testament for garden, translated garden throughout the Old Testament word appears, mentioned in the New Testament in the Koine Greek. That word garden doesn't just mean garden. That's good. Yeah, it's a garden. But it's more than that. It is a garden that is walled. That's what the word means. It means a walled garden. I translate it that way for that reason. A walled garden. When God gives land, he gives boundaries. You go to the book of Deuteronomy, which is a land deed, transferring title in fee simple to the nation Israel. And just like any land deed, the book of Deuteronomy starts out early on, and it defines distinctly the boundaries of the land that the allodial landlord, Yahovah, bequeathed to the nation Israel, using what we've used in our common law tradition on deeds for centuries called the metes and bounds method. The metes and bounds. Well, it goes thence 40 rod north, due north, till it comes to the Bon Paul Creek. I'm using names from home. Bon Paul. That's a French word, by the way. And there's a Bon Paul Creek at home. And Bon Paul means good road or good walking, or paw, like a foot or a hand. The Bon Paul. Till you hit the Bon Paul, and then the boundary turns due west another 40 rods, and then it turns due south another 40 rods, and then it runs due east another 40 rods. Well, if I keep going, I'll have a perfect square, and the metes and bounds method always ends up right back where it starts. And the starting point is identified clearly by some physical object or some marker that men have set as surveyor. The United States is no different. We won't have a country if we don't have well-defined boundaries. The second thing a country has to have is a people within those well-defined boundaries. I'm giving you the standards of international law as it's understood today, and this is proper. Part of our common law tradition. Bounded land with definite boundaries, a people, a militia inside of that land. Number 3, a law that people has ordained to enforce within the boundaries of that land. There's 3 things. You got a country. And our country uses that standard. Other countries have used that standard to decide whether or not they're going to recognize the existence of another country. Do you have those 3 things? Well, if it looks like you do and it's sufficiently in order, we'll recognize you as a nation. We'll send you a diplomat. I know what some of you are thinking. I'll just have my own nation. I'll have those 3 things, and I'll put in an application to every nation in the world, and I'll have my own country. But we have those things. Had then the different states of the United States, which united together, each a government of its own, Did each state, before they united together, have a government of its own? Absolutely. And each of the 13 states, when they united together, had a common law government of 3 branches, co-equal branches. Neither one of those 3 branches with the power to trump the other and be final. Each branch sworn to uphold the Constitution. Each person in each branch of government of those states sworn to uphold the Constitution. And some of you are thinking, no doubt, if you're thinking at all, there was no Constitution when the country started. Oh, yes, there was. No, we were under the Articles of Confederation. Well, we still had a Constitution before the Articles of Confederation. And if you go to England today, they'll talk about their Constitution, and they use a little c, their Constitution. When our country started, the letter we wrote to Parliament, 14th of October, 1775, the first meeting of the Congress of the United States. I believe it was at Annapolis, Maryland, where the Naval Academy now is. And they said, they wrote to Parliament and said, we demand the responsibilities of our Constitution. That was 11 years before, 75. No. That'd be more like, that was 11 years before our country started. And another 15 years, 14 years before our Constitution. But we said we demand the duties, that is the rights of our Constitution, most foremostly trial by jury. They said that. Well, what was their Constitution? Here's what it was. Here's what it is, and it still is. It's our common law. It's our common law. Our common law is before our Constitution of the United States. And our Constitution of the United States is impossible to understand or apply in any meaningful way unless unless our common law breathes life into it. Our common law tradition breathes life into it. Otherwise, it's as empty and flat as a blown bladder. Dispirited, a skeleton of mere words, meaningless without our common law. Our Supreme Court has said that on more than one occasion. Many others have too. That's our common law tradition. And I stress that because that is why our Constitution is not taught. That's why it's not read. That's why folk lose interest in it. They want to talk about it. They want to glorify it. They want to brag on it, but they don't have a clue what's in it because it's impossible to have any meaning, to be alive to us in our minds and get excited about unless we know what all those common law words and phrases in it means. And the whole thing, our Constitution, is couched in the phrases of our common law, and the men that drafted it and the men that ratified it were awash. We're swimming. We're breathing at the atmosphere of our common law. They knew it well. How then the different states which united together, each a government of its own? How did they have each a government of its own if they're united together? And that's still the case. Each of the states of the United States, there are 50 now, each of them, 48 when I was born, now they're 50. Since I've been kicking, we've added Hawaii and Alaska. And when I was in school, we'd pledge allegiance to the flag every morning. And I remember the flag we pledged allegiance to had 48 stars. They never did replace it. Well, what's the use? It looked about the same anyway, I reckon they figured, and it cost money. When they tore down that old school building, I went down there with my bosom buddy, old Dave Bailey, and we got that flag out of the schoolhouse. I've got it somewhere, but last time I saw it, it rotted considerably. The moisture in the Wabash Valley is pretty high. It's raggedy, but I still got it someplace. Different states united together. How could they have a government of their own? Answer, yes. But each of the states together agreed to put themselves all under one government. But they kept their state governments. And they put themselves under one government. In Washington, D.C., it came to be there. They put themselves under one government that had very, 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 and still has, as a matter of law, limited powers for certain things that they bequeathed together to that government, which the militias of the several states established. That government in Washington, D.C. It says, our Constitution says, we, the people. The people. That's the militia of the 13 states. And they tell there that they are the ratifiers, the establishers of the Constitution. We give too much credence to what we call the Founding Fathers. They were politicians. We're thankful for them. But never forget, they gave people what they wanted. If the militia of the several states had wanted something else, they would have submitted something else to them to ratify, but they didn't. They knew, politicians don't. I had a guy tell me the other day, he said, we need a man in office that runs government like a business. I heard Newt Gingrich say that, give a big speech about it. I thought, have you lost your mind? Nobody's going to run the government like a business unless it's for profit. And it ain't for profit, and so it ain't going to happen. All you're going to get is the danger of bribes and graft and pork. That's all you're going to get. The object is to keep it to a minimum. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. And this, friends, neighbors, and relatives, is a Common Lawyer Comments concerning our common law, our law of the land as it is compared and contrasted with its ever-present antagonist on every continent, the law of the city. And our Constitution of the United States is a brief of common law government, and it stands diametrically opposed to the civil canon laws of Rome that govern every country in our world.